Evening, America. Tonight, we are proud to announce that this is our 1-month anniversary of the broadcast of Q News Tonight, the world's first live daily gay evening news show, and it's 7 p.m. Thursday, February 6th. We begin tonight with historic breaking Q News. Q News Tonight is declaring that Mayor Pete Buttigeig, America's first openly gay presidential candidate, is the winner of America's first 2020 presidential primary, Iowa. This historic moment seems familiar when in just 2008, Barack Obama won Iowa as the first black candidate. This news makes American history. The flawed Iowa caucus was held Monday night, as you know, and is the first state primary to cast delegates for the Democratic nominee to run against President Donald Trump on November 3rd, 2020. Multiple election night fumbles took place in Iowa on Monday night, including phone problems, a new reporting app failure, and especially the Iowa Democratic Party mismanagement of the caucus itself. Results have been trickling out slowly this week with a backdrop of the Senate impeachment trial and the State of the Union address. Q News Tonight declares the South Bend mayor the winner with a current total of 26.2% of the results. Bernie Sanders is second with 26.1%. And then Senator Elizabeth Warren comes in third at 18%, and Vice President Joe Biden at 16%. While Iowa and state electorate statistical arguments are going to continue between the Mayor Pete and Bernie campaigns, Q News Tonight reports on the magnitude of this moment to the world and to the United States of America. It is not lost on our news program that just a mere 5 years ago, this would have been an unimaginable moment. Not only that this would come from a mayor of a small city in the state of Indiana, home of the Vice President Pence, not only that the first gay candidate would win the first primary, but also that this news would be announced by the first live gay evening news television show in the world. Our tagline at Q News Tonight is never more true than at this moment. Out of the closet and into the headlines. Tonight, therefore, it would be appropriate to lift a glass of champagne and toast this moment. We are just 50 years plus 223 days since the historic Stonewall riots in New York started the modern gay rights movement. Tonight, even if it is only for a moment, perhaps an even greater historic event is occurring live as we all get to participate. And it could change the world. Q News Tonight is live tonight and unscripted, so anything can happen. Tonight we bring you the news of and perspective from the LGBT community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and these are my co-anchors, Aaron Darr and Napoleon Plays. So let's cue up the additional news. We continue in breaking Q News about reporting Nancy Pelosi calling Trump at the State of the Union a, quote, a backdrop for a reality show with no basis in reality at a press event held today. We've prepared that moment. Watch this.
As you know, this week we had the State of the Union as required by the Constitution of the United States. The President is to submit in writing or in person his statement of the State of the Union. What happened instead was the President using the Congress of the United States as a backdrop for a reality show, presenting a state of mind that had no contact with reality whatsoever. It was quite appalling to hear the President say to the 150 at least million families in America that are faced with pre-existing medical conditions, a benefit that is afforded to them in the Affordable Care Act.
Here we see the continued feud with Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who states that after the State of the Union, Trump lied on a reality show in terms of it not being real at all, that he's using the backdrop of government as a means to continue this parable of what government is supposed to be. She mentions things like healthcare and the Affordable Care Act as being protective of our community, the LGBTQ community, when he has demonstrated that that is not inherently the case. We'll get into more of that later. But the real question for us now is this a lack of reality that might be harmful to us as a community? Are we turning our face towards something or away from something with the president that might end up harming us as a whole, as a LGBT community? History has told us that a lot of times if we're not paying attention to what's going on, then obviously we will be one of the next ones hit. If you stay silent, then you're going to be the one that's targeted. And we're seeing that continually with Trump.
Aaron, you're a political expert at the table. Your reaction specifically to these words from the Speaker of the House today?
Well, I absolutely agree with her. I think our president does not live in reality. I think he lives in his own reality television show, and everything that he says, everything that he does is done so with a motive to get his name out there. Unfortunately, I think the State of the Union in particular was nothing more than a re-election speech. It was very partisan, and it was a completely and totally missed opportunity by the President of the United States to use it as a facet to bring together the country, and instead he did not do that. He divided us.
We come out of our breaking Q news to queuing up the world. China today has announced that it is reducing tariffs by 50% on $75 billion worth of U.S. goods because of or related to the coronavirus escalation. Aaron, tell us a little bit about what's going on in China.
Yes, China announced on Thursday that it will cut in half by 50% tariffs on $75 billion worth of United States imports, as the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, continue to step back from a years-long trade war that has significantly hurt both countries and dented global growth. This reduction affects the United States goods, and China that has imposed tariffs last September. Starting next week, China will cut an additional 10% tariff rate that has been enacted on some goods to that of 5%, thus 50%. Other goods that were taxed at an extra 5% will now be levied at a decreased percentage of 2.5%, according to a statement from China's State Council Tariff Commission. All of this is coming in lieu of the epidemic that we see in China with the coronavirus, as they continue to see its impacts within their local markets and the global economy.
We continue in queuing up the world by talking about the controversial Religious Freedom Bill, and its implementation could lead to massive discrimination. Before we give you the complete story of that, we have prepared this for you. Watch.
The Attorney General says he's consulted over 90 groups so far. Religious and faith groups want to be protected from discrimination. Some want it to go further and give them a positive right to religious freedom. Christian Porter is standing firm against that, saying the bill will not be a license to discriminate. Gay rights groups are worried it will weaken protections by overriding the state's anti-discrimination laws. Business is concerned about how it might restrict them and how they deal with their employees.
This news comes to us from Australia. This all started back in 2017 when a survey went out to the populace asking if they believed that same-sex marriage should be legal, and it was an overwhelming response of yes, that people thought that it should be legal, and this was a pursuit of further action, of further protections that could be sought in that name. That was 3 years ago. Today we're seeing that both the public and religious communities are in opposition of this bill, and that includes not just the general public, but human rights organizations, equity advocates, religious groups, and even the businesses themselves. So how relevant this actual bill is to any organization is what's being put into question, with the idea that it might not be, because on paper it protects the rights of religious groups, but in reality it's a license to discriminate for anyone to discriminate on the grounds of religious beliefs.
I'm curious in terms of what is happening in Australia and provide parallels to the United States. Religious freedom being a major argument, Vice President Pence especially pushing. Anything that you feel that we're learning, that we're watching in Australia that would apply to the United States? Do we expect in the very zealot kind of feeling that they're pushing in Australia that it could come to even stronger here in the U.S.?
We've commented on similar things here in the U.S. that perhaps the vocal minority of certain groups is overstated, and those that bills like this are actually meant to protect are not seeking that protection. And so, with 1,000 Angry Moms, I believe is along the names of that, we're seeing a lot of different organizations that are doing the same thing as we're seeing in Australia.
Yeah, just a minor correction. It's a million.
A million.
1 million moms.
1 million. That's not even 1,000.
Yeah,
A million.
By the way.
but you know,
A million or two.
Well, it's also important to note in this conversation the Do Not Harm Act, which is a bill that would not allow any of this. So if a religious institution is using their religious faith to discriminate against someone, it would be then illegal for them to do that. So I would encourage our members of Congress in the United States Senate and President Trump to enact the Do Not Harm Act.
Interesting. We move to queuing up the USA, and we are reporting tonight about a bill to strengthen federal hate crimes law has been introduced by one of the presidential candidates. Aaron, tell us about what's happening here.
Yes, a bill has been introduced by 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota and Republican United States Senator Lisa Murkowski. This is the Justice for Victims of Hate Crimes Act of 2020, which would modify the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009 to change the qualifications of hate crimes. It would state that a bias against a protected class only needs to be a substantial motivating factor for a crime to be considered a hate crime, not the only motivating factor. Protected classes include gender and sexual minorities, according to the current Matthew Shepard Act. So very happy to see this, and I would encourage, again, members of the United States Senate and Congress to enact this and for President Trump to sign it.
We queue up business tonight by reporting that Amazon, Nike, American Airlines, and others speak out about Tennessee's anti-LGBT bills and are suggesting from the corporate level that they're putting economic success of Tennessee at risk in continued pursuit. Before we tell you the details of the story, we've prepared this.
LGBT media advocacy organization GLAAD has asked the music industry to take a stand against pending legislation in Tennessee they say threatens the rights and safety of LGBT people. GLAAD president and CEO Sarah Kate Ellis said at a Nashville press conference, "There is no doubt that these anti-LGBT bills will jeopardize this state's economy."
We're seeing here a perhaps new approach to combat anti-LGBT bills. Tennessee, now called the state of hate by many, has seen these bills from the Tennessee put up against the Tennessee Business Against a Discrimination group. And this movement was organized by Nashville LGBT Chamber of Commerce, by GLAAD, by HRC, and by the Freedom for All Americans. There's a lot of groups behind this advocacy. We're seeing over 142 businesses sign this letter opposing Tennessee's bills, and that includes, as Al stated, Amazon, Nike, Dell, Lyft, Marriott, and American Airlines. Of note to say is that FedEx, the largest company in that state, is actually not a part of this, and they received a lot of criticism for backing out and stating that they did not want to be political in this manner. Tennessee receives over $22 billion of tourism markets, at least reported in $22 billion of tourism money. It was reported in 2018. And they've stated that policies like this can signal that the state isn't welcoming to everybody and could hurt the economic success.
I'm curious, repeat the largest employer in Tennessee that is not going to participate in protest is who?
Is FedEx. They're not going to be participating. And this honestly reminds me a lot of the protests in Georgia over what films and what type of companies would be able to work there, would be filming there with all of the laws that they had that were also...
I'm curious, what was FedEx's justification for not standing up for LGBT rights?
That they chose to not get involved in any sort of policy or things that could be of controversy. Including this, but they were definitely responded to as to that being the inappropriate way, especially with all of these other major organizations that were saying, we support this, why aren't you?
Yeah, it's 2020. Come on, FedEx.
Human rights.
Exactly. All right.
Anyway, we want to keep talking about these things with everybody that's watching out there, and that's why we want to know, are LGBT voices important to you? Can the news of the world have a gay community perspective? If you, like us, think the answer is a resounding yes, then like and subscribe to Q News Tonight on YouTube and Facebook. Do our gay cultural stories impact you, your friends, and family? Start a watch party. Get your circle involved in our conversation as it supports the gay community.
Absolutely. We queue up entertainment tonight, America, as we report on talk show host Bill Maher labels transgender issues as crazy stuff in an attack on Elizabeth Warren. I can't wait for this story. Aaron, tell us about what's going on at Bill Maher.
Yeah, it's a very disappointing story, but unfortunately, with Bill Maher's history of sexism, it's not surprising. It's the Real Time with Bill Maher talk show host who has repeatedly criticized Democrats in the past for expressing their support for trans equality has turned his fire on presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren this past week. The left-wing presidential hopeful has vowed to appoint a trans ally to the role of education secretary after she would, as president, strip Betsy DeVos of this very important role, as she has stated that she would strip protections for transgender children. At a campaign rally in Iowa last week, Elizabeth Warren said that she would ask a young transgender boy who she met on the campaign trail to help her vet her picks. Bill Maher has, of course, vehemently opposed this and says that this is a crazy trans issue on Real Talk, going further to state that Bernie Sanders has always been the same guy. Elizabeth Warren, who I've always liked, but she kind of has done some stuff that I didn't like. And today she came out and listen to this. She wants her Secretary of Education to be vetted by a high school student. I'm not kidding. It's crazy. I think that's absolutely appalling and offensive. And like I've said before, racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, it can exist in any party. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of it find itself prevalent in the very far left wing of the Democratic Party. And Bill Maher is a perfect example of that, someone who is not on the right side of history in supporting our trans brothers and sisters.
Are you a fan of Bill Maher and Real Time?
Absolutely not. Yeah. I never have been.
I'm a fan of Real Time. And as I was listening to your reporting on this story, I thought to myself, well, this is really an interesting thing in parallel to the impeachment vote. So much of what Bill Maher says I agree with, and I support and am interested in many of his points of view, but he's really on the wrong side of the trans issue. And to attack Elizabeth Warren has been our presidential candidate, of all of the candidates, the most pro
LGBT, really, honestly.
Absolutely, and so it's an interesting approach. We continue tonight in Queuing Up Entertainment to give you sad news. And Hollywood icon Kirk Douglas, millennials, Gen Zers, have you heard of Kirk Douglas? Has died at the age of 103. Napoleon, tell us what's going on here.
Yes, Kirk Douglas has died at the insane age of 103. He is a 3-time Oscar nominee, winner of an Oscar Lifetime Achievement Award, and a Presidential Medal of Honor Award. He was starring in over 90 films, wrote 10 novels, memoirs, and of course one of his most memorable movies was Spartacus, came out in 1960, and he became a gay icon for that movie.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that movie name?
Yeah, Spartacus.
So
we'll get this right here. Spartacus,
right.
A gay icon of a movie, especially the character itself, in part because of the homoerotic tendencies of the characters, and of course it was one of the first times that level of masculine nature was shown on camera. And it also spawned a TV series from 2010 to 2013.
A magnificent
TV
series.
That even had a gay character named Agron in it. He, in past interviews, had stated that he really wanted to make sure that he was portraying a real person, that gay or straight it would have been the same character, and that he wanted to focus on making not a caricature, but a human being. Great support for us.
Yes, absolutely, and continue into being supportive. That's why Q News Tonight is here. And Q News Tonight is part of the Happening Out television network because we are the daily news. But you can also watch the best of entertainment live every Monday night at 8 p.m. on happening.fun. We are also part of the most popular live gay TV show in the world every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on It's Happening Out. It's like talk shows, television's The View with a whole lot of gay people.
And then they look at each other.
We look at each other.
Well, speaking of all things queer and being on camera,
yes,
that goes into our next entertainment story.
Right,
yes,
we
does.
queue up, continuing queuing up entertainment. Actress Jameela Jamil comes out as queer. Aaron, tell us about what's happening here.
Yes, actress Jameela Jamil has come out as queer in a Twitter post this week. She's received some backlash. She's participating as a judge on a reality television show called Legendary, which follows gay culture and its impact on voguing. But there's not so much of gay culture really implemented in this, in having hosts that really truly understand or represent the LGBTQ community. And in doing so, Jameela Jamil has come out as queer, and she's stated her plight in doing so and finding difficulty as an Asian person in doing so as well.
We continue in queuing up entertainment by telling you Irish television history is made. Two same-sex couples are on the British version, Irish version, of Dancing with the Stars at the same time. Napoleon, tell us what's happening at Dancing with the Stars.
In Ireland, Dancing with the Stars will have its first same-sex professional as well as its first same-sex celebrity dance partners. There's going to be two different partnered groups. This is going to be in Ireland, and it's also the first for the UK as a whole. The executive producer has gone on record to state that this is a historic moment for Irish television and that it's a positive representation for the diverse community that he wants to represent. The people that are going to be performing are Brian Dowling and Kai Widrington, as well as Lottie Ryan and Emily Barker. Brian was able to help push this through after winning on Big Brother, stating that he wanted an LGBT same-sex couple on Dancing with the Stars. And now we're seeing that happen and history being made. And I think that you were also telling me that over in Denmark, they just had a winner of Dancing with the Stars that was a same-sex couple.
Yes, absolutely. In combination with Denmark's win on Dancing with the Stars and this new announcement in British television, Ireland specifically, I'm excited to see if it will spill over into the United States for Dancing with the Stars, because it would be fantastic to watch two same.
I'd love to see Sean Spicer and John Bolton together. I think it'd be great. Could you imagine?
Well, I'll be waiting for my invitation. I've got a lot of dance experience. Maybe they'll send that invite, and we'll have ourselves represented. Dancing with the Stars.
My desire of watching Dancing with the Stars has just reduced dramatically. Thank you very much for that. America, we want to let you know that we are broadcasting tonight from our new set in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center, right here on famous Wilton Drive, Wilton Manors, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We joke in our broadcast here that we are coming from the gayest place on planet Earth, and you really should come to see how gay it is, as you can see, the gentleman in front of me. We'd also want to thank our set designers of this new set that has been built here in large part by Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, and we thank them. We continue in our news tonight by queuing up gay culture. And Bayard Rustin, the famous writer, has been pardoned now by California for consensual sex arrest. And Aaron, explain to us what is happening. It's been going on for a while in California.
Yeah, it has. A very interesting story here. So in 1953, Bayard Rustin, who's known for his involvement with Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, was arrested for a consensual sex act, which involved another man, so a gay sex act, while in public in a car. And that speaks to the sodomy laws that unfortunately have been on the books and have been used as tools of oppression to target gay people and incarcerate them. And in the process, they have to register as sex offenders. So California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is a Democrat, has chosen to pardon Bayard Rustin after much attention to this has been brought forth by members of the California delegation.
It's sad to me when I was reading about the California governor doing this, that he is departed, and he had to face what he had to face alive, not only in terms of black, but being gay and being charged in this way. I just can't imagine.
And you see him as someone who was very high profile, but that's just because he was high profile that we're even hearing about this. The number of people that must fall into the same category who will never know, and who people maybe close to them never knew that story.
Absolutely. We move into health and queuing up health tonight by reporting about what Donald Trump has promised. And he's made an announcement to end AIDS in 10 years. However, many experts are saying that his policies are actually harming that goal. Before we tell you about that, we prepared this. Watch this.
We have launched ambitious new initiatives to substantially improve care for Americans with kidney disease, Alzheimer's, and those struggling with mental health And because Congress was so good as to fund my request, new cures for childhood cancer, and we will eradicate the AIDS epidemic in America by the end of this decade.
Trump says that he will eradicate AIDS by 2030. And then, after offering no plans, goes on to honor Rush Limbaugh, someone who has booed the government funding of HIV for many years on his radio programs, and it went on to say that the way to stop HIV is to not ask another man to bend over and make love at the exit point. That was what happened right after his statement, as we see here, to eradicate HIV. Trump continues to attack notions that will help people with HIV and in the LGBTQ community in ways of harming the Affordable Health Care Act, defunding essential health programs, and not providing necessary care to people living with HIV. He hasn't even been allowing doctors to fight for the care, and rather is denying doctors the ability to care for a lot of these people. Historically, we've seen presidents make different impacts in the last 5 that we've had since Reagan, since AIDS became as well known as it is today in the 80s. What we're seeing here is that Trump's plan has been critiqued as not being feasible unless he's willing to make substantial changes in his plan.
Aaron, again, our political perspective and this health perspective of HIV, any thoughts about his challenge in State of the Union?
Well, I mean, I think that my feelings in regards to his statements are all over Nancy Pelosi's face. I mean, you can see she's shaking her head and she's very flabbergasted, as was I when I was watching this live last night as well, because it's nothing more than lies. You know, as someone who is HIV positive myself, I have a pre-existing condition. And Donald Trump, last night during the State of the Union, went on to say that he is fighting for people with pre-existing conditions, which we know that is not true. The State of the Union was unfortunately covered in falsehoods, and unfortunately he used the HIV/AIDS community as a tool in which he is trying to garner some kind of sympathetic support from others in eradicating this, when his actions say otherwise. I mean, one of the first things that he did as President of the United States once he was elected was to disband the HIV Council, which was put into place by President Clinton in 1994. I mean, it's very unfortunate because even his vice president, as we know, HIV is not a gay disease, supports gay conversion therapy and all these other things that harm people that are the most susceptible to contracting and transmitting HIV/AIDS. I thought it was absolutely offensive. He is truly the textbook definition of the word narcissist and deplorable.
That's quite stark. We continue in queuing up health by reporting tonight what a healthy heart rate may be. A normal resting heart rate may not mean what you think it does. Aaron, tell us about what this is all about.
I'll tell you, my heart is racing after that because it's absolutely horrible. So, of course, this study is of more than 90,000 people with smartwatches, which reveals that a resting heart rate can vary amongst individuals from up to 70 beats per minute. New results suggest that monitoring how an individual's resting heart rate fluctuates over time may better tell physicians more about his or her health than comparing a snapshot of his or her health to that of the general population. So this, of course, begs to ask, what is a normal heart?
Is there a reinterpretation of a resting heart rate in terms of what the number should be?
Well, it's study that could vary by individual, and that going over time is what really should be checked. And I'm immediately thinking, especially in terms of consensual LGBT sex that often involves sniffing certain things that can change your heart rate, what that implication is for your heart rate over time. I know that we've discussed it at different points, but that must come into play over this exact thing we're talking about, why you have to keep track of your heart rate over time versus just in an instant, because that's where the numbers will show the variation.
And I understand you're in the gym every day, you eat great, so your heart rate is of no question at all.
Trump's president, so my heart is through the roof.
Right. All right. Well, we continue in queuing up style tonight, and very exciting to many LGBT members, New York Fashion Week 2020 is getting ready to start, and it's the shows and the designers to watch for that we talk about tonight. Napoleon, tell us about what's getting ready to happen in New York.
Right now, we're seeing that it's not just New York Fashion Week men's that was just ending, but that we're going into the New York Fashion Week. So we have 2 weeks back-to-back of a lot of fashion. We've seen a lot of departures from people that have been in the scene for a very long time. Jeremy Scott, exits from Alexander Wang, Pierre Moss, Tommy Hilfiger, and what that has allowed is an entirely new generation of artists and designers to come into the focus. People like Chromat, Thomas Cawson, The Blondes, Laquan Smith, Private Policy. We have a whole list of people that are a part of the queer community that are going to have a chance to step into the spotlight. We're seeing fashion weeks change a lot across the board, with Rihanna's last year that aired on streaming TV and upstaged the Victoria's Secret fashion show as of last year, and we might be seeing a huge evolution in the fashion industry as it becomes even more queer positive.
I'm curious, are we excited about Fashion Week starting?
After the shirt you wore last night, absolutely. I wasn't sure if I was shopping for soft furnishings at Pier 1 or if I was just looking
I
at...
certainly hope the next slides reminds everybody that we're an LGBTQ show, because they wouldn't know that at this moment.
Yes, exactly. All right, I'm going to let that pass. We're coming to the end of the week, and I'm in a good
I will
mood.
never judge you for wearing prints like that ever again.
Yeah,
Ever.
love your glasses. Hope you win. We're queuing up Vote 2020. The Iowa race is coming down to the wire between Mayor Pete and Senator Sanders. This may sound like a contradiction to what we declared at the top of the show, but it really isn't, because of what Senator Sanders has done this afternoon. First off, we prepared this for you. Watch this.
And if you go out on the streets to New Hampshire, you go to Vermont, and you ask people, how do you determine who wins an election? Well, from where I come from and where everybody else comes from, the person who gets the most votes wins. We got the most votes. And as I said before, and I got to say this to my friends in the media, is you guys have been putting too much emphasis on these SDEs. There's a confusion that SDEs will determine the number of national delegates. National delegates are important. SDEs do not determine.
So as we just saw, Senator Sanders, of course, is just raging on in New Hampshire about the results of the ongoing Iowa caucus, which for many has become too close to call. It has Mayor Pete at 26.2% and Senator Sanders at 26.1%. So I think it's very frustrating, because I think this continues to play into the narrative that Bernie Sanders had said in 2016, that the super delegates and in general, just delegates, the whole system is rigged. The primary is rigged. Everything is always working against him, only him, and nobody else that has ever run for president. And it's very disheartening when our main objective should be unity and nominating the best candidate, whoever he or she is, to defeat Donald Trump. And this is not the way to go about doing it, attacking other people, especially in the manner that Senator Sanders has. He spent more money in terms of dark money attacking his Democratic opponents than anyone else. And even doing this, it just furthers that divide, which is very disappointing, when we all need to come together after we have a nominee in June of this year to make sure that we do what we need to do, which is defeat Donald Trump on November 3rd, 2020.
In related news, we continue in queuing up Vote 2020 to talk about the vice president. Joe Biden sharpens his attack on Sanders after the Iowa defeat. A little bit of a different perspective on this story. We've prepared this. Watch.
Every Democrat will have to carry the label Senator Sanders has chosen for himself. He calls him, and I don't criticize him, he calls himself a Democratic socialist. Well, we're already seeing what Donald Trump is going to do with that. I have great respect for Mayor Pete and his service to this nation, but I do believe it's a risk, to be just straight up with you, for this party to nominate someone who's never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people in Indiana.
What you watch in New Hampshire today is the vice president basically saying that Bernie Sanders has proclaimed himself as a Democratic socialist. As you know, at Q News Tonight on Tuesday night, after the Iowa caucus, I did commentary here on the show about how Iowa and the caucus may have delivered the election right from the first steps to President Trump. If I could have postponed the commentary 2 days, Joe Biden would have been the summary support of my commentary every step of the way. His point today in New Hampshire is that we must be exceedingly careful on the election of Bernie Sanders because of how he's going to be identified by a large section of America as a communist. Is he a communist? No, I don't think he is. But the argument that Joe Biden makes here and makes news today here in New Hampshire is that is what he is going to be labeled as. And then the issue becomes, how does that affect us down ballot? Let's define down ballot in the news story of what Joe Biden has done today. He is basically saying there are 5 critical Senate seats at play. If the Democrats are going to try to take the Senate back, they must win those 5 seats. There's no question about it. And with Bernie Sanders being the top ticket for the presidential nomination, and it is successful in painting him as a communist, what will happen in terms of those seats? And then it will continue all the way down ballot. And that's what Joe Biden has done today in the news. We continue in our final note of queuing up the Vote 2020 with a story for Bernie Sanders. And what we are going to finish our block on Vote 2020 is just to report how well Bernie Sanders is doing. He's in New Hampshire. It has been reported today that he has raised $25 million in January. Aaron, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, since launching his presidential campaign in February of 2019, United States Senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders has raised more than $121 million, the most of any Democratic presidential contender. This quarter alone, $25 million has been raised from low dollar amounts, typically in the amount of $18. These are going to be very crucial funds for him going into Super Tuesday. But of course, what else? New Hampshire next week, which currently has Bernie Sanders leading at 24%, Mayor Pete at 20%, Biden at 17%, and Warren at 13%.
Well, that is the news of the LGBT world for tonight, Thursday, February 6th. We return to our breaking Q News at the top, historic moment of Q News tonight, declaring Mayor Pete the winner of the Iowa caucus. Absolutely historic moment for the LGBT community in the USA, and it affects us all around the world. We are here daily at 7 p.m. at Q News Tonight, and we finish our evening news tonight, the first live daily gay evening news in the entire world, with some good news. It's been quite a week. Iowa, impeachment hearing, State of the Union, which you could argue was not even a State of the Union, Rush Limbaugh winning the Medal of Freedom in the middle of the State of the Union. So we end our show tonight with some good news, and we would like to bring attention to you something that we all enjoyed very much. Had to do with beer, but not so much about beer. Coors Light announced that they are giving 1,000 people $100 specifically to adopt a dog on Valentine's Day. And we thought that's good news for the LGBT community. We have prepared that. Watch this good news.